Students, welcome you all to the digital learning platform, a virtual platform created by Department of Collegiate Education. Today in this session, we were discussing about the computation of debt equity ratio in Unit 2 of Capital Structure, subject Financial Management, prescribed for 5th semester BCom, Mangalore University. Before going to study the computation of debt equity ratio, let us recall what we have studied in previous sessions. Right from the beginning of this chapter, we were studying about the capital structure. Capital structure comprises of two types of funds. A capital structure is the mixture of various funds that are raised to finance the assets. The capital structure consists of equity or owner's fund and the borrowed fund. Owner's fund consists of equity capital, preference share capital, and reserves and surplus. Whereas borrowed fund consists of long-term borrowings. In the previous session, we studied about debt equity ratio. Debt equity ratio is the ratio between debt and equity. So debt and equity are the two components of capital structure. So debt equity ratio that represents how much portion of debt is borrowed as against the equity capital. Debt means long-term borrowed capital, whereas equity means the owner's capital comprising of equity capital, preference capital, and reserves and surplus. We already know that debt equity ratio, it measures the risk of owners as against the borrower and debt holders. So debt equity ratio, it helps us to know the risk of the debt holders as well as the owners. So in this session that we were studying, we will going to study about the how to compute debt equity ratio, the significance of debt equity ratio, and the problems of debt equity ratio. How we can compute the debt equity ratio? Debt equity ratio can be calculated as follows: long-term debt divided by owner's capital. So if you take long-term debt, so what is the total of long-term debt divided by owner's capital will give us the debt equity ratio. So already that I mentioned, funds means there are two types of funds, owner's funds and borrowed funds. Owner's funds means equity, or owner's funds or equity means equity share capital, preference share capital, reserves and surplus plus retained earnings minus share premium and fictitious assets or miscellaneous expenses that is mentioned on the asset side of the balance sheet usually. Borrowed fund means, or debt means, long-term loans, debentures, public deposits. The ratio between debt and equity is called debt equity ratio. For example, if a company wants rupees 5 lakh to finance its assets, ಒಂದು ಕಂಪನಿ 5 ಲಕ್ಷ ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಾದರೆ ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಆಸ್ತಿಯನ್ನು ಖರೀದಿಸಲಿಕ್ಕೆ, ಇಫ್ ಎ ಕಂಪನಿ ಟೇಕ್ಸ್ 2 lakh rupees from debt and the company raises rupees 3 lakh by means of equity share capital, the debt equity ratio is long-term debt is 2 lakh divided by 3 lakh, so it gives 2 lakh divided by 3 lakh. So that is called debt equity ratio. So in other words, it is called, for every 2 rupee of debt capital, 3 rupee of owner's capital is there, or we say it is 2:3 is the debt equity ratio. Let us look at this problem. Let us read the problem first. A toy manufacturing company has equity share capital rupees 5 lakh, preference share capital rupees 3 lakh, and debentures to the extent of rupees 1,50,000. Calculate debt equity ratio. So, how to calculate debt equity ratio? First of all, we understand the formula for debt equity ratio: long term debt divided by net worth. So, in the problem, the long term debt is rupees 1,50,000, whereas net worth is nothing but equity or owner's fund that we say. So, owner's fund is, there is equity capital 5 lakh, preference capital 3 lakh. So, in total it is 8 lakh. So, 1,50,000 divided by 8 lakh, it means to say that 0.1875, or the debt equity ratio is 0.1875 is to 1. It means for each rupee of owner's fund, there is 0.1875 debt capital is taken. Next problem, another problem. Let us read the problem first. Silver Bullet Limited has equity share capital 8 lakh, preference share capital rupees 4 lakh, reserves and surplus rupees 6 lakh, debentures to the extent of rupees 30 lakhs, and the long term loan from IFCI Limited rupees 15 lakh. It has rupees 3 lakh miscellaneous expenditure on the asset side. Calculate the debt equity ratio. So, debt equity ratio, long term debt divided by net worth. Debt means debentures plus long term loan from IFCI. 30 lakh plus 15 lakh is equal to 45 lakh. Net worth is equal to equity share capital, preference share capital, reserves and surplus minus miscellaneous expenditure. 8 lakh plus 4 lakh, 6 lakh minus 3 lakh is equal to 15 lakh. 45 lakh divided by 15 lakh. So, debt equity ratio, so it comes to 3. So, it means to say that debt equity ratio is 3:1. That means for every 3 rupees of debt, there is 1 rupee of equity capital. So, here to conclude, debt equity ratio is long term debt divided by owner's capital. There are two types of funds: owner's fund plus borrowed fund. Owner's fund, equity capital, preference capital, reserves and surplus, retained earnings, minus share premium and fictitious assets. Borrowed fund refers to debt, or borrowed fund or debt refers to loans, debentures and public deposits. Thank you.